What's going on, guys? My name is Matt Omega, and it's now time for something completely different. Ratchet & Clank 3, the third outing of an unemployed wannabe mechanic turned galactic hero and his robot backpack, is a game that is beloved by many, myself absolutely included. And who wouldn't love adventuring around entire galaxies, having fun and thwarting evil with the aid of an absurd number of excessively destructive weapons? Although instead of doing just that, quite a number of people have opted to throw these weapons in the trash in favor of running around like a madman and bonking any moving entity that enters their line of sight with an oversized wrench. Truly, video games are wondrous things. The wrench-only run has become something of a staple of Ratchet & Clank challenge runs. Similar to Mega Man's Buster-only runs, the challenge is to complete the game with your default weapon, which in this case is a short-range melee weapon in a game filled to the brim with enemies more than willing to bring a gun to a knife fight. And in most cases, said default weapon would typically be your weakest option. But what if I said we could go further? The Plasma Whip. A melee weapon introduced in this game as an alternative to the wrench. Its cool design, good range, and the fact that it's just fun to use make it beloved by some fans. Some others, on the other hand, are indifferent at best at the fact that it is one of the weakest weapons in the game. Limited by ammo and sporting a power level outshined by even the wrench by endgame, can we beat Ratchet & Clank 3 with only the Plasma Whip? The rules for this run are pretty simple. The only weapon in Ratchet's arsenal we're allowed to use is the Plasma Whip and all of its upgraded forms, including its final form, the Quantum Whip. I only make the distinction because this is the internet, meaning someone will yell at me if I don't. If any other weapon in Ratchet's arsenal is used in any way for any reason, the run is forfeit and we have to start over. The wrench will be allowed in order to turn bolt cranks, but nothing else. Not even breaking boxes. Gadgets, of course, are free reign because good luck killing anything with these things, but extra care is gonna need to be taken with the Refractor gadget as it does have some damage potential. Turrets and vehicles will also be considered legal when they are deemed necessary. With all that out of the way, let's get started, and right off the bat we hit our first major obstacle. Planet Veldin serves as our tutorial level, and it's here we get our first two weapons, but the Plasma Whip can't be obtained until the second planet, Florana. Well, all we need to do is get through Veldin without attacking anything, right? Well, yes, but that's not going to be as easy as it sounds, as this level does have a couple of roadblocks that will be very difficult to bypass without the ability to attack. Also, if and when we get to Florana, the whip isn't just a weapon that we find lying around. No, we have to buy it for the low price of 7,500 bolts. And how do we get bolts? By killing enemies and breaking boxes. See our dilemma? Have no fear though, for we have a way! Just because you can't attack enemies, doesn't mean no one else can. The Galactic Rangers may be complete pansies who would rather run away from a fight than actually do their jobs, but there are a couple of instances where they'll stay in place and fight alongside you. Additionally, friendly fire exists among enemies. So for example, by lining yourself up to catch the small one-eyed Terranoids between you and the walking mechs, you can use their lasers to take the little critters out, earn you some bolts and even some experience. Typically, Ratchet earns experience that'll end up increasing his max HP as he kills enemies, but apparently, the game doesn't care who does the killing. If something dies, Ratchet reaps the rewards. And guess what? This can be done with crates too. Our first major roadblock of the planet is not very far ahead, however, and comes in the form of this Terranoid attack ship that continuously fires and aims right for you when you get close. You're intended to take it out with your newly acquired Nitro launcher, but since we obviously don't care about what the devs intended, we need to come up with a few other options. If we're patient, we can just stand there and twiddle our thumbs as the Rangers take care of it themselves. You know, this would go a lot faster if both of you shot at it. Or we can try to get past it. Running around it is possible with some careful acrobatics, but is a surefire way to get shot. So instead, we're going to become acquainted with a new friend. Weird collision detection. If you jump and glide into the attack ship, instead of slipping off like you should, you'll just fly right over it instead. Take that, intended method! Oh. It's here that we discover an odd quirk about these attack ships, in which simply getting past it without blowing it to smithereens causes the pilot to give up on life and just hit the self-destruct button. I mean, I feel for the guy, but this does mean more money for us, so... The next attack ship can be just run past normally, causing yet another pilot to lament a little too hard about how much of a failure he is, and we can continue stealth kill stealing until we get to the dropship. The next part of the level is where the difficulty ramps up a bit, as we're literally dropped into waves of enemies. Make sure to make the enemies destroy as many crates as possible before the Rangers take them all out for some extra cash. Eventually, the final door opens, leading us to our last roadblock of the planet. And of course, it's another attack ship. Normally, we'd once again have to blow this thing up, which would cause the bridge to extend and allow us access to the end of the level. But we're still playing the pacifist, and getting around this one is gonna be a little trickier. The gap is too far for us to long jump or glide across, and for some asinine reason, the ledges that we normally use as cover have invisible walls placed on top of them, meaning that we can't stand on them. It would seem as if our run is over before we can even attain our only weapon. But if you've been paying attention up till now, you'll know that we still have one more thing that we can use as a platform. The attack ship itself! By heading over to the very right of the platform, we can start gliding into the ship and fly right on over it to land us on the other side. Be careful though, as after we glide out a certain distance, the ship will head back to its default position, which happens to be a little further right of where we're jumping from. With careful aim, we can begin invading its personal space like there's no tomorrow. This jump can be a bit finicky and may require some finagling to start getting height. I found that equipping the helipack and mashing X while holding R1 does the trick just nicely. Once you get over the attack ship, make sure you aim your glide toward the side of where the bridge extends from, as that's an area where we'll just slip off. It's a tight jump, but you should be able to reach to the ledge of the cliff just in time to grab onto it, allowing us to finish up on Veldin and move on to Florana. The very beginning of Florana is where we can first buy the Plasma Whip, but you're more than likely still short on bolts. If you died while crossing the final chasm on Veldin, running around and allowing all the enemies to die by everyone's hand but yours again will net you a little bit of extra cash, but in this case, our pacifist run isn't over just yet. Which is a real shame too, as right near the start of the level is this big old room filled with tons of crates and a bolt multiplying jackpot crate sitting right outside. Game, you torture me. We're gonna have to trick these natives and swamp monsters into killing each other and breaking boxes for us, but it won't take too long to acquire all the bolts we need to finally obtain our only weapon. From here, the run will act quite similar to the wrench only run, as the plasma web acts just as the wrench does. You can chain regular strikes into a 3-hit combo, you can throw it like a huge deadly boomerang, and you can slam it down from midair to deal double damage. The whip has great range for a melee weapon, and throwing it into enemies can deal multiple hits at once, dealing a great deal of damage over time. And to top it off, at our current level of health, it also has greater power than the wrench, which grows more powerful as your health increases. Honestly, the whip is actually a fantastic early game weapon, the only downside being that it uses ammo. But this will change over time. Now that we can start killing enemies ourselves, the rest of Florana is no problem. Before we move on to Marcadia, our first new armor becomes available to us. Buying these will be crucial if we want to survive, but I skipped out on the first set to save on bolts. We're gonna need a lot of them by endgame. Marcadia boasts little challenge, with the only potential hiccup being the laser defense facility. It's here that we obtain the refractor gadget, which has the ability to redirect lasers. This will be necessary to progress, but it's important to keep in mind that the lasers can be redirected into enemies, which will damage them. If this happens, the run's over, so we need to be careful to take out everything before playing with the deadly pretty lights. If, however, the enemies run into the lasers of their own accord, then that's not my problem. Aquatos would normally be where the effective range and ammo capacity of the whip are put to the test, but my whip reached level 5 and evolved into the Quantum Whip partway through. The Quantum Whip is capable of launching razor-sharp sonic waves with each regular swipe, increasing the whip's range and damage potential by a lot more than I thought. The waves travel a pretty substantial distance, and when the whip is used at point-blank range, utilizing the power of both the regular swipe and the wave at the same time, it's genuinely surprising how much damage you end up doing. It won't be enough to carry us through the whole game, but man, was it fun to abuse for a while. However, as the whip has now reached its maximum level, it's the most powerful that it will ever get for the rest of the run. And it's a level of power that will eventually be surpassed by the wrench as our health increases. In other words, it's all downhill from here. Be sure to pick up the adamantine armor, as our next major challenge lies on Terranosis with our next boss, Big Mama Terranoid. Mama Terranoid constantly moves toward you, getting faster the further away you are, and attempts to swipe at you. Just keep enough distance from her and use corners to your advantage to throw the whip at her while she's preoccupied. Ammo is sprinkled around the arena, so running out won't be an issue as long as you're not too gung-ho. After hitting you or missing a few times, she'll cling to the ceiling and start shooting at you with the turret on her back. The best thing to do here is just dodge and wait for her to come back down. After taking out half of her health, she'll try taking out the floor, moving us on to the next arena. Just rinse and repeat until... Oh, you kill-stealing son of a bitch! With Martin Lawrence taken care of, we head to our next roadblock, Planet Dax. Dax has 3 pathways we can take, and 2 are no problem. The island path is a very short romp where just ignoring the guard bots is the best thing you can do on your way to nab the charge boots. The facility path is where the enemies will start taking it up a notch, exemplifying just how careful we'll need to be from here on out. After skipping around one of the hacker segments because it's the worst thing ever, and tearing through the enemy forces, all that's left is the one path that was keeping me up at night. The path along the docks is a simple platforming challenge utilizing the hypershot, while an incredibly rude airship pilot fires missiles at us. So of course, it's up to us to teach him some manners. There's just one problem. Our throws can only reach the warship from the very edge of the breakable platforms around the arena. By the time you've landed a hit, it's more than likely locked onto your position for another missile volley, destroying the platform. Also, only the very tip of the whip reaches, meaning we only end up inflicting the minimum amount of damage possible from a throw. Playing dirty, I see. Well, that's just fine, because so can we. It's time for a little help from our old friend, Weird Collision Detection. The collision on the rocks and cliffside below the next platform is wonky as all get out, so we can abuse this to our advantage. It's possible to perform high jumps on certain points, but I end up having the most success by replicating my method of gliding over Belden's final attack ship and straight up flying up the wall. Equip the helipack and charge boot over to these two rocks on the right. Time it so that you land right in the middle of them and begin gliding in between them. Once you're in place, hold R1 and mash X. You'll eventually climb up the rocks enough that you'll perform a double jump and start gliding into the cliff face. Hold R1 and mash X once again to start gaining height and eventually a high jump up to safety. Now, it's time to teach this thing a lesson. But wait, I hear you cry. Can't you just progress the story now that you skip past the boss? Well, yes. And no. See, while we could just walk into the cutscene trigger and update the story mission to take us back to Annihilation Nation, the mission we actually have to complete there won't exist. Because the warship is the trigger. Think about that for a second. We're able to completely skip this thing and advance the story, but the appropriate mission won't unlock unless we specifically defeat the boss. This feels like some unnecessary extra code behind the scenes, though. I mean, why the distinction? It only would have made things a tad harder for them in the back. Anyway, now that we're on this platform, we're in range to hit this thing with a whip, but don't think that makes this easy. The warship just doesn't stop moving, meaning that we'll be spending most of the flight waiting to line up our shots. Fortunately, the pilot is both starving for attention and completely stupid. The warship's movement can actually be influenced by which direction our camera is facing, and since we're not supposed to be over here during the fight, the ship will always think we're somewhere in the arena. So by simply turning our camera somewhere behind us, we can manipulate it to fly over in our direction. Kind of. And well, make sure all your hits land true, and punish its unwarranted aggressiveness for good. Obani Gemini reintroduces laser redirection with the refractor, meaning we once again have to be careful with where we point it. Or we could just clip through the force field with no risk. Blackwater City throws us right into wave after wave of Tyrannoids, which aren't much of a problem as long as you watch your ammo, but it's important on the bridge to take out the sources and other noise trying to cross as soon as possible, so the Rangers can destroy the mechs on the other side. Back in Annihilation Nation, Scorpio may seem unbeatable for those exclusively throwing the whip to attack, or at least he did for me during my failed attempt, but some well-aimed hyper strikes, or better yet regular strikes, will see you making a lot more progress. Or it could just be me. I'm pretty sure we've well established by this point that, well, I'm an idiot. Our next major boss comes in the form of the galaxy's greatest and sexiest pop star. Oh god, I'm starting to find robots attractive. Her attacks are fast and very frequent, but a direct hit from the whip will stun her. Keep your distance and only rely on throwing to give yourself enough time in between each attack to readjust your position and aim. You'll want to throw in a rhythm. Throw too soon after the initial stun and the hit won't have the same effect. Stun lock her into only using her shockwave after she escapes her cage, which, yes, is hilarious, and end her music career for good. Just keep a good eye on your ammo, it can be more of an enemy than she is. Metropolis is the next point where the difficulty seriously ramps up, as the Tyrannoids trade in their old bodies for some shinier and much sturdier new ones. So can you, with the Aegis Mark V armor now available, but I didn't, because money. Given how rapidly the whip's power is beginning to get outclassed, it's at this point where sticking it out and killing everything in sight is becoming less and less feasible. Luckily, we still have an extra special secret move up our sleeves. Making like the Galactic Rangers and running away like a pansy. And we're right into another boss fight. After a dramatic reveal that absolutely no one saw coming, we're up against Giant Clunk, who can't sit the heck still. Clunk's attacks are relatively easy to avoid, with the real difficulty being in actually landing a hit, as he always flies away when you step onto the same platform. Use the wind down of his attacks wisely to sneak in a few throws, and begin your victory lap when you reduce his health to halfway. A second train comes in with plenty of supplies and more platforms, letting you get side by side with the Clunker to land some easy hits without him flying away. Once the colossal hunk of junk is thrown in the trash, it's time for one of the most difficult planets in the game, Zeldrin, aka the crash site. There are enemies everywhere. And they've beefed up quite a bit, with both their projectiles and melee attacks dealing massive damage. Granted, it doesn't help I've only been rocking the adamantine armor since Tyrannosis, but still. Fight or just run on through, both options are equally dangerous. I ended up choosing the latter and only barely got through with my life. After reaching the escape pod, you have another choice to make. Either progress forward through waves of enemies and a tower climb that leaves you very vulnerable, or jump on this pile of crates to reach the platform you just jumped down from and backtrack all the way to the beginning. The more enemies that were taken out in the journey up, the easier the second option will be. Or you can try showing off like I did, which ended up both failing and succeeding at the same time. Apparently, the cutscene trigger is gigantic enough that I was able to reach it even with a failed whip jump. Things were weird for a few seconds after, but it's nothing a reload couldn't have fixed. And no, you don't have to learn any speedrunning tricks for this. The gap is perfectly traversable with just the charge boots and maybe a last second glide. The typical course of progression here would be to complete Iridia before unlocking Quark's hideout, as the warp pad is required to progress through the ladder. However, it may be in your better interest to hit up Quark's hideout first. You can't progress along the main path yet, but that's not what we're here for. Head through the gravity brute course behind the ship to eventually find the most crucial piece of equipment for the endgame, the PDA. It costs a whopping 250,000 bolts, but your patronage is rewarded with a portable ammo vendor that you can access at any time, as long as you can pay for shipping and handling. Iridia is nothing we haven't seen before, but the mission Assassination is definitely a step up in difficulty. Be sure to clear out the area around each commander before you go in for the kill to make things easier, except for the bridge. Because sources are terrible and I hate them, we're not even going to give them the satisfaction of a fair fight. Walk along the underside of the bridge and line yourself up so that you can hit them, but they can't hit you. And take out the commander while you're down there. Now that we've gorged ourselves on a healthy helping of cheese, it's time to get back to the challenge. Our arrival on the penultimate planet of Chorus grants us the ability to purchase one more fantastic piece of endgame equipment, the Infinox armor, the best armor in the game. While it's definitely feasible to finish the game with the Aegis Mark V, we're definitely going to want this baby to maximize our survivability. The only issue is the price tag, with a low cost of 1 million bolts. Given that we've only had to buy one weapon the entire playthrough, it's possible that you may already be around that mark, but remember that we also just forked over 250 grand for a portable ammo shop. Earning the rest of the necessary bolts won't be easy. Good thing I'm a completionist whack job! Throughout the entire playthrough, I've been going out of my way to take on as many side missions as possible. All the ranger missions have been completed. All of Annihilation Nation's whip-friendly challenges have been conquered. And yes, I even cleaned out the sewers. Look at that shine. I did need to start trying to progress through Chorus to make up a few more remaining bolts, but before long, the Infinox armor was ours for the taking. Don't think that'll make these last two planets a cakewalk though, as the game will take its last few opportunities to throw everything at you. And yes, I'm pretty sure that does include the kitchen sink. Don't be afraid to book it if you get overwhelmed, which is very likely. The command center is the final stretch, and a gauntlet filled with the Terranoid force's best and brightest. Remember, surviving long enough to reach the end is much more important than the extinction of their race right now. Jumping and gliding around the final room can trigger the next cutscene and end your visit here early, which I highly recommend taking advantage of. From here, all that's left is the big bad himself. Dr. Nefarious' attack pattern is relatively easy to get down. He'll first produce clones of himself to dash at you, which you can easily avoid by circling around him. Next, he'll bring out his laser guns and wave them right in front of him, leaving his sides and back wide open. Position yourself on one of his sides and take this opportunity to get a few throws in. Finally, comes the shockwave bombs, which you'll need to avoid by jumping over. There's just enough time between each impact to get just one hit in, so time your throws and jumps to lay on the damage. Once a quarter of his health is gone, he too will reveal his intergalactic ranger and run away like a pansy. A small army of his toughest troops yet stands between you and the next arena, but you don't have to pay them any mind. Just be careful, because some may still be able to fire at you during the next phase and litter the arena with bullets. I may or may not have learned that the hard way. Luckily, the Galactic Rangers arrived just in the nick of time, and they actually intend to help out. They even gave their weapons a monstrous power boost. I love a redemption arc. When you reach the next arena, it's time to jump back into the fight. Nefarious has a couple more tricks up his sleeve in the form of missiles and lasers, but everything else is pretty much the same. Do watch out for his clone attack though, as he adds more clones into the mix as his health drops, and at 3/4 empty, he floods the arena with them, making for his most dangerous and hardest to dodge attack. I don't know about you though, but I'm hungry for a little more cheese. Simply climb atop the tallest of the rocks on the edge of the arena and watch them run about like a bunch of flailing headless chickens. Just don't take 3 rounds of this to figure out which rock to stand on like I did. I learned a few too many lessons today. Continue whittling away his health when it's safe, and don't take any unnecessary risks to slowly but surely send this mechanical bully and his personal transformer to the scrap heap. The Ratchet & Clank 3 Plasma Whip Only Challenge has been completed. This run was definitely interesting to say the least. Despite its similarities to the wrench-only run, going so far as to even utilize similar techniques, exploits, and routing, it's a challenge that I'd say was well worth experiencing. The unique approach to tackling the opening levels ended up being more difficult than I expected when I first tried this run out, with Veldin's final chasm being an interesting bit of problem solving. And exploitation. Dax was something of a highlight with the warship fight, as during my early attempts I had all the trouble in the world trying to abuse the wonky collision of the rocks and cliff. It was only after almost an hour of trial and error that I ended up finding the solution that I did. Discovering some of the untapped power of the Quantum Whip's regular attacks was also a pretty neat discovery for me. I knew from the beginning that this was going to be easier than the wrench-only run in some regards, and more difficult in others. Having to spend an entire planet unable to attack anything was challenge enough, but when we finally obtained our weapon, most of the early game was a cakewalk. And this run ended up being easier almost the entire way through, despite the whip eventually falling behind in power, all thanks to its frankly incredible range for the kind of weapon that it is. Really, the only real hiccup from mid to end game was ammo management, a problem that was completely removed once the PDA was brought in. If I were to do this again, I think I'd skip out on the Infinox armor at the end and settle for the Aegis Mark V, just to make the last couple of planets and the final boss a little more challenging. Though the PDA should probably stay, I'm not sure how possible Nefarious is without it. All in all, I'd definitely recommend trying this run out. It's just like a wrench-only run, but with a little more spice. Shoutouts to Ratchet speedrunners, Zem92, and the Rixer. Watching your speedruns and tutorials has taught me a lot more about one of my all-time favorite games than I thought possible, which definitely helped me a lot during the run. And huge shoutouts to GameChamp 3000 and Picasper Yellow. This run has been an idea of mine for years, and watching you guys do what you do gave me the push I needed to finally make it happen. If you're interested in watching the successful run, click the card on screen or the link in the description to check out the 5-part playthrough. Just a fair warning though, the parts are fairly long and don't contain a lot of commentary. I'll also be leaving them as unlisted as to not clog up your subscription feeds. What did you guys think of the video? Would you like to see more? And if so, what other kind of runs would you like to see me do? This is definitely a departure from my usual content on this channel, but given how much of a blast I have putting this together, I can certainly say I'm interested in doing more. Let me know down in the comments, and as always, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, my name is Matt Omega, and I'll see you guys later.